In this video of Microsoft ASP.NET, we are going to discuss a new category of controls, that is validation controls. Whenever we design a form where we are taking some input from the user, there may be a chance that we may not get the correct information. So we can go for validation controls in order to put some validations on the client side. So here validation controls are here to basically validate the user input so that we can get the correct data. And what all the controls are? Required field validator will be used when I want to make some particular text box mandatory. Means if there is a field called first name and I want that user must enter the first name, then I will use the required field validator for that particular text box. Similarly, range validator will be used when I want some specific data, maybe a number, a amount of any particular currency, a date in a particular range. So I will go for the range validator. Similarly, I will go for compare validator when I want to compare two values. For example, I want that password and confirm password must be same. So here we have to compare two values. Similarly, it's about equality, whether if you want to compare the greater than, less than or any other particular operator, you can still go for the compare validator just in the case you want to compare two values. Regular expression validator will be used when I want a value in a particular format. For example, email ID must be in a particular format like @ then some domain name then dot at least one. So that is an expression. So this is what we can validate using regular expression validator. Custom validator, where we can define our own concept like what I want to validate. So I will just write a code that may be a C# or JavaScript function which will define the functionality for this custom validator. And finally, validation summary, the control which will summarize all the validation messages and somewhere in the page, either as a text on a browser on a page or as an alert box. So let's go through each of these controls separately now. So now let's start the implementation of the validation control, where in the toolbox I'll find a section for these validation controls. But before getting started with these controls, make sure in web.config you have made a small change. What? Let's see there. So here in web.config file, which is used for configuring your web application, here I will just pass one application setting inside which I will add a key. In app settings you can add multiple keys for the different purposes. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a validation setting. And what in validation setting? The unobtrusive validation mode, and I will set it to null. So make sure you have made this setting before using the validation control in your website. Once you have done this, you can simply come to your web pages and can start working with the validation control. So here the first control which I am going to discuss is the required field validator. As the name says, it will ensure that the control which is associated with the required field validator is properly filled up. So let's add this one here in the table, as here you can see. So we can set the required field validator to any of the control, and here I will validate the user ID text box using required field validator. So in starting I will discuss few properties which will be common for all the validation control, which are display static. If you will say display static, the controls will be added on the web page during the compilation time itself, means when the page is getting initialized. But if you will make it dynamic, that will simply ensure that the rendering of such controls will be happening when at the runtime the validation will take place. So I prefer dynamic display. If you will say none, the validation message will not be shown. So I will go for dynamic for now. Error message is the descriptive message which you want to show. So here I will say user ID is mandatory. Alright, and then the font color, it's not required, but yes, I'll just make it red. Text, I can make it asterisk. Alright, so now here you can see if the text message is set, then it will show you the text message, that is asterisk. Alright, so this is about the property, and in all the controls of validation you will find these ones. Again, there is something called control to validate, which will be common for all the validation controls. And here I will choose txt underscore user id, means the text box which is associated for the user id. I have renamed all the controls so that it will be easier for us to understand. So now here you can see that txt user id is set. After that, set focus on error. So set focus on error is false. That means as soon as the validation will take place, the cursor will start blinking, or the control will directly go to the control which is set as the control to validate. So if I'll say it true, that will actually happen. So these are all the properties which you will find in all the controls, including the validation group. So now the specific property which you will find for required field validator is the initial value. So basically this initial value will help us out in the case when I will be changing the default value of the control. For example, the default value of a text box is blank, and if the text box is blank, I want to raise the validation. Similarly, this initial value by default it is blank. So if the initial value of required field validator is equal to the value of control to validate, then this validation will take place. That means initial value is blank, text box is blank, both are equal, so the validation will take place. That means it will not allow the null value. So let's execute and see whether it is going on correctly or not. So now as here you can see the form is here. Now when I click on submit, you see the text is being here, cursor started blinking. That is because of the set focus on error. So as soon as I'll click here, it will be validated. Now if I'll enter any value and then I'll click on submit, you can see now the page is getting posted back, because so far there is only one validation control is there. So this is how you can apply the required field validator in all the text boxes and all the controls where you want to make the input mandatory. Now similarly, if I will apply the required field validator for a drop down list, I'll have to do one change. Let's see what is that. So let me do some common changes. So as you can see, I have changed the display, error message, text, control to validate, that is DDL countries, drop down list countries, set focus on error. Now I'll have to make the change in the initial value. As here you can see the initial value of this control is select a country. So I'll have to write the same, that is select a country. Alright, so it is like that. Now let's execute. Okay, let me change the font color as well. Alright, so let's execute it now. So as you can see, both asterisks are here, but the focus can be set only on one control. So whichever will appear first, the focus will go onto that control. Once you have entered anything there, you will submit, and now you can see there is a blue outline over the drop down list. That means the focus is now on the drop down list. So I'll choose a country and then that is gone, and now I can submit the form as well. This is about the required field validator. So the next control in the list is the regular expression validator. Whenever I want some value to come in a particular format like email ID, mobile number, so I can go for the regular expression validator. Internally, this control works on the regex concept of .NET framework. So I'll add this regular expression validator for the field email ID, and let's do some changes now in the property. So few changes which were common, I'm going to make them. So I have set all the properties like display, error message, for color, text, control to validate, which is mandatory one, and set focus on error. Now the specific property which will come here is the validation expression. So here you can see an ellipse button. I'll come, some predefined formats are here, like I'll get the internet email address also in that. So I'll choose that. And internally, as I said, it is following the regex concept of .NET framework. So let's execute this one. Since I have not applied the required field validator here, so it will not show me the asterisk right now. But if I enter anything in the incorrect format, then obviously it is going to show me that. Alright, so whatever you are entering here now should be in the correct format. Alright, whether you are entering the correct value or not, that may vary. Alright, so let me enter something here. So this is the correct format. So now the validation is gone. So if you want email to be mandatory as well, you can add the required field validator as well. One control can be validated through multiple validation controls, but one validation control only validate one control. Alright. So as here I said, you can add one more validation control for this text box, which will be the required field validator. Similarly, if you want to validate the mobile number, you can again come to regular expression validator like this, and again I'll change few properties. And now here in the validation expression, you can write it by yourself also. As in mobile number, I am expecting the 10-digit numerical value. That means only the digits value can be there. So what can I do is passing a \d. That will enable you to enter the digit value. If I add plus, you can add up to any digit numbers. Alright, but if I will pass 10 inside the curly braces, that means I can only pass 10 digits. So let's execute this to check it. So if I'll enter any alphabet, it will show me invalid number. Similarly, if I'll enter any number, it will show me invalid number again. Alright, now let me put some 10-digit number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now this error is gone. Alright, though there are few other exceptions through other validations, I should say, which are there. So I'll fill up the form completely and then I'll submit. But this is how you can start working with the regular expression validator control. So the next control in the list is the range validator, which will allow a user to enter the value in a given range. So for the date of birth kind of field, I can go for this range validator. So let's go and see some properties. So first of all, I'll start with changing some default properties as we were doing. So the common properties have been modified now. Now let's see some specific type of properties for the range validator. I'll start with the type, where I will have to specify like which type of value I am going to validate, whether it's a number, whole number, or a decimal number, or a currency, or a date, or a string. So depending on the type, you can set the minimum and the maximum value for the range validator. So here for date of birth, I'll have to go for the date. Here in the error message, I have said age must be between 18 to 45. So I just wanted like the user must be entering some date of birth which will make the age in this range. So according to that, I will have to pass the minimum and the maximum value. But the dates changes on the daily basis. If it is a number, if it is about a currency, fixed amount, I can write that particular value right here as well. But since it is about date, I'll have to go for the coding for making the changes. So in the page load event, I can do that. So what I will do, I will say range validator 1 dot minimum value. So here minimum value is of string type. So I'll set the date according to that. So date time dot now. Minimum value means the date of 45 years ago. Alright, that will be the minimum value for this range validator. So date time dot now dot add years, and for that I'll have to go 45 years back. So add years minus 45 dot to short date string. Similarly, for range validator, dot maximum value is equal to date time dot now dot add years, and maximum it could be 18 years ago date. So minus 18 dot to short date string. So now again it will not mind when I will not enter anything here, but obviously when it's about some date, let me enter some value like 12/07/1934. So it's saying age not in range because it will not make a person of age 45. Alright, So but if I'll make it like 88, then it will not mind. Okay, it's 12th 7th month and year 1988. Similarly, if I will enter something like 2005, again it is not causing a user 18 plus. So this is how you can work with the range validator for a given data type. Now let's come to the other control, which is the compare control. As the name says, whenever I want to compare two values, I will go for the compare control. In our form, we have the fields like password and confirm password, which must be same. So I can use this compare validator in the confirm password text box so that I'll ensure that the value of confirm password must be same as that of the password text box. So here I will add this compare validator, and in the properties again I'll start with some common properties. So now as you can see, display error message, 4-color text, and the control to validate and set focus on error. All these properties have been set. Now let's focus on the specific properties of the compare validator. So again the type is here, which will make us like which type of value I want to compare, whether it's going to be a number or a string. In this particular case, since I'm working with the passwords, it will be a string. Now after that, the operator property is here. If you choose the number or something, integer or double currency something, then in that case you can go for the different operators like not equal, greater than, and others. But in this case I'll have to go for the equal only, because the password and confirm password must be equal. And then the last property, which is specific to this one, is the control to compare. Basically for comparing, we have the couple of properties like control to compare and value to compare. Make sure only one of these two properties must be set. If both are not set, then it will give you an error. If both are set, again it will give you the error. So they follow actually the XOR operation, so only one can be true and other must be false. So in our case, I don't have any specific value, but in case when you go for any OTP comparison or any captcha comparison, then you can go for the value to compare property. Otherwise, you will have to go for the control to compare in this case. So I will say I'll compare it with text password and I'll validate text confirm password. So let's execute it now. I'll start entering the password here. I have not set it as the password mode, alright, so that you can see what I am entering into it. So if I will do any incorrect value, it will say password mismatched. Again it will say the same password mismatched. But if I'll enter the exact same value, it will not say anything. So this is how you work with the compare validator. At last, we have the custom validator. So we'll come to toolbox to choose the custom validator, and here I'll apply it for the password. As the name says, it's custom validator means you can define your own function, whatever you want to put in the validation. And you have two choices. Either you can go for a JavaScript function to put a client-side validation, or you can go for the C# code for putting the server-side validation. So here I'll just go to the properties to set some common properties as we used to do. So as you can see here, like I have set all the common properties. Now if you want to create a JavaScript function, then you can just define that and later you can pass the name of that function right here in the client validation function. And apart from that, by default, as the other validation controls, if you will leave the text box empty, this custom control will not validate that. But if you want to do that, you can just say it true, like validate empty text to true. Now the client validation function is not there, but I have already set the control to validate. So whatever the definition we will do, it will be applied for this text box. So just double click on this custom validator, which will create this particular function with a couple of arguments: object source, which is the custom validator, and args, which is containing the value for the control to validate, that is the text box. So here what I'll do, I'll just take length len is equal to args dot value dot length. Now I have the length, and if length is greater than or equal to 8 and length is less than or equal to 15, then in that case I will say args value is fine, it's valid, so args dot is valid is equal to true, else args dot is valid is equal to false. So this is the definition. The similar definition you can put in the JavaScript as well. So let's execute it first on the server side, as it is server validate. So since that was a server validate, you can put any code using the C#. Now here when I will click, you see it is not showing the error for this. Why? Because so far the validations are on the client side itself. So let me put something here and in the country. So now when I'll submit, it will show invalid password, and you see here the page is getting refreshed, alright, and then it is showing me the invalid password, that is the error message. Here I said that the length of the password should be between 8 to 15 characters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and as soon as I did that, the error is gone, the validation message is gone.